Good evening. I'm Brian Trumbore, StocksAndNews.com. It's Tuesday, November 25th, 4:02 p.m. Eastern Time. That's the Dave Clark Fives alone, despite their 17 top 40s. That's the only number one 1965. Terrific day in the markets. Dow Jones up 663 points, 1.4%. S&P 500 up 60. NASDAQ up 153. Oil 58.03. Oil fell mainly on the reports suggesting that Ukraine had agreed to terms of a revised peace deal, but Russia has not responded last I saw, and they're not going to accept it. Gold 41.33, silver 51.35, Bitcoin back down a little today, 87,400. 2-year Treasury 3.46%. 10-year 4.01. It had been 3.99. The markets rallied because of the ongoing rate cut hopes. Odds of a December cut are above 80%. Last week they had been around 35. You still have a divided Fed. According to the Wall Street Journal, of the 12 voting members on the Open Market Committee, 5 are still in the pause camp, but you have a lot of influential voices that have been speaking of rate cuts, from John Williams to Christopher Waller. Late yesterday, in an interview with the Wall Street Journal, San Francisco Fed President Mary Daly said she supports lowering interest rates because she sees a sudden deterioration in the job market as both more likely and harder to manage than an inflation flare-up. She's not a voting member this year, but her views are notable because she rarely takes a public position at odds with Chair Jerome Powell, who has not indicated where he comes down on the issue. Remember, we aren't getting October, November inflation or jobs reports until after the Fed meeting on December 9th and 10th. A report around the fact that Kevin Hassett, an insider in the Trump administration, was the favorite to be the next Fed chair, certainly helped propel the markets further. We did have 2 government reports today, finally, but they were for September. Retail sales less than expected, and a producer price index report where the headline figure was as expected, up 0.3 for the month, 2.7 year over year. But core ex food and energy was better than expected, so treasuries rallied further on that news. Nvidia stock, despite the big rally, overall continues to fall, down 3%. And its new rivalry with Google and Google's Gemini chatbot, which is powered by Google's own chip that seems to provide rather hefty competition for Nvidia's chips, had Google continuing to rally as Nvidia's going down. Google hit another all-time high today. Retailers had a huge day. Kohl's, symbol KSS, up over 40% on better than expected earnings. Abercrombie and Fitch, which I haven't been into in probably 30 years at least, up over 35%. Dell Technologies just reporting earnings, sees full year revenue and EPS guidance above estimates, so it's rallying a bit. So we learned in the past 24 hours that the original 28-point peace plan for Ukraine was drafted by not just U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, but also President Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner after secret meetings with Kremlin insider Kirill Dmitriev in Miami, and that was the reason why Secretary of State Marco Rubio was so confused last weekend, because he only learned of the full scope of the crappy proposal once it was leaked. And so Rubio has been doing yeoman's work in damage control. Dmitriev, of course, demanded the controversial points on NATO membership and Ukrainian territorial concessions, that they be included. He also pushed for the Ukrainian troop cap and economic agreements between Washington and Moscow. The Wall Street Journal noted further that Witkoff, Kushner, and Dmitriev had, quote, similar views on what the plan should look like, which to me is rather outrageous. So, thanks to Rubio, the U.S. and Ukraine drafted a new 19-point peace plan yesterday that vastly differs from the original 28-point plan. Ukrainian First Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Kislytsov later said both sides felt positive over the new plan, which removes limits to the size of Ukraine's army and no longer gives blanket amnesty for war crimes committed during the Russian invasion. Very few things are left from the original version. Kislytsky told the outlet of the new plan, told the Financial Times of the new plan, we developed a solid body of convergence and a few things we can compromise on. The original version sought to shrink Ukraine's armed forces from 900,000 to only 600,000. And of course, Kyiv was supposed to cede its entire Donbas region, which Russia has failed to conquer for more than a decade. And then last night, what did Russia do? Of course, it bombed Kyiv again. At least 7 were killed. The bombardment followed President Zelensky's announcement in his regular evening address to the nation that progress had been made in negotiations over peace proposals. Now the list of necessary steps to end the war can become doable, Zelensky said. But Russia launched 460 drones, 22 missiles. So what are Russia's red lines? Ruling out Ukrainian NATO membership for good, not just a promise, but enshrining it in Ukrainian law and NATO's statutes. Russia also wants the Donbas. On NATO, there's an understanding that Ukraine will not get into NATO because not all members of NATO would accept it. So this is really no longer the disagreement it once was. Well, that's all for tonight. I'll be back with you tomorrow, Wednesday. Take care. Lots of fire activity suddenly in my area. Good night, folks.